Let's rock and roll. Ryan McDonagh is in the center of trade rumors, but doesn't make sense for the Tampa Bay Lightning to trade away one of their biggest defensemen. We'll talk about it today on the Locked On Lightning podcast.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making the Locked On Lightning podcast your first listen every single day. We are your free daily Tampa Bay Lightning podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, want to start out by saluting our everydayers, the people who tune into every single show every single day. We love you. We appreciate the support you give us week in, week out. I'm Nick Morgan, and I am joined by the Dan Boyle to my Pavel Kubina, Greg Steven. Greg, how's it going, man?
Excellent, and you are on point with those.
Yeah. Oh, we have an entire season to get through. Some of them will not be Tampa Bay Lightning related, I'm sure. Real quick, before you get started, want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Big show today. We alluded to it in our last show, but we're going to do a deep dive on the Tampa Bay Lightning defense. Couple of things that we would do to get the Lightning back to that defensive stalwart they were a couple of years ago. Plus, the 2025-26 schedule is out. Greg and I have some thoughts on some of the toughest spots that the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to have circled on their calendar, as well as a couple of takes in there as well. First, though, let's talk about one of the big things going around in Tampa Bay Lightning lore, headcanon, chatverse, whatever you call it right now. And that's Ryan McDonagh. Now, if you talked to us after the season, it seems like Ryan McDonagh was kind of going to be around for the long haul, Greg. JBB was very vocal about, yeah, we're probably going to sign him to a contract extension, just not sure when. And then suddenly, a couple of weeks ago, a report from Sportsnet's Nick Kyprios made it seem like the Lightning would be open to trading Ryan McDonagh. They didn't say actively shopping. But it does sound like if there's a team out there that might pick up McD, they'd go for it. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think as far as what I've read, it seems like McDonagh wants to stay in Tampa. I think he's been very vocal about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fans would like him to stay, right? I think for the health of the defense, he should stay. I think their disagreement probably lies somewhere with the term he's looking for. He's an older guy at this point, right? And you got to take into consideration someone's age when you sign a long-term contract. So I'm sure they're having their discussions right now. And I think, this could pan out in the same fashion that Steven Stamkos's end in the Lightning turned out, right? It's very possible.
Bring that up.
Look, you got to be prepared for all the possibilities. I think the decision for the Lightning is, do we want to continue to go for it now, or should we, begin to look at retooling and maybe rebuilding for the future? In my opinion, I think you want to keep McDonagh. You want to try and keep him happy. And, if you sacrifice him, I don't think you win the cup this year at all.
Well, there's another kind of layer to that you sort of brought up is this isn't just dead weight. Ryan McDonagh was one of their best defensive players last year. And I think a big reason that Tampa Bay defense got better last year and Tampa Bay kind of finished back up in towards that threat level that they had been, those 3 straight years they went to the Cup final. In the 2 years McDonagh wasn't here, I got some stats for you. The Lightning were 17th in expected goals against, 12th in scoring chances against. Those were in the 2 years McDonagh wasn't here. Last year, 8th in scoring chances against, 12th in expected goals against, and then 4th in total defense, total scoring. So he was a big part in what made the Lightning defense better. And it's one of those things that if you trade him, Greg, you suddenly have a massive hole on that blue line.
Yeah, absolutely. And what he and Chernak did together this past season was awesome. I mean, they were the defense, right? I mean,
and brought out the best, I think, in Erik Chernak.
Yeah, exactly. And they play a different style of hockey, and that pairs together so well. And you'd hate to see Chernak lose his guy as well, right? So I think there's just so many things with McDonagh that you want to lock him in, especially given how the lack of depth for the Lightning on the defensive side is poor right now, right? So it's just a guy you can't give up, I don't think. I think you want to just pay him what he wants, as much as you can. I see McDonagh as the guy that takes the team-friendly deal as well. That's all just speculation, but I do see him as that guy. I do think he will remain in Tampa, though.
Yeah, $6.75 million for this one last year. To me, I'm with you. I don't think it makes sense to trade Ryan McDonagh right now. There's two, I think, instances where maybe you do. And that is if you find someone better who's also cheaper this year to give you maybe more room to go make a big splash with a trade or something before the season starts. Or there's a prospect out there that you just can't pass up. Because, I mean, as much as this cup window is open, you do have to kind of start looking at the Tampa prospect pool a little bit and say, like, okay, 5 years from now, who's going to be the people that are the core of this team, especially on that blue line? Because beyond Victor Hedman, there's not a lot of depth on that defensive prospect spot. In your, like, am I off base at all here? Is there an opportunity? Like, is there anything that you would? I guess let me rephrase it this way: like, if they trade Ryan McDonagh, is there a deal out there that makes sense? Like, is there something that you would get back that you'd be like, okay, I could be on board with this?
Sure. I think absolutely is the answer, right? I think it depends on what the other team is asking. I'd imagine if you're going to get a good player that's better than McDonagh, you're coupling McDonagh with someone else, right? And I see that as someone in the middle of the forward pack, like Nick Paul, maybe someone like that would probably be dealt with him if that were the case. And I'm thinking of guys like Anderson, maybe. He's been talked about. He was talked about in the free agency this past season, right? Guys like that, I maybe would take over McDonagh just because he's got more longevity. Other than that, I don't know how much I'm really willing to give up right now for the Lightning. I do think there is probably going to be an offensive sacrifice to improve the defense this season, however.
Interesting. That kind of parlays into what we're going to be talking about next, which is the one big thing we would do to fix this Tampa Bay Lightning defense. They got a lot better last year, but I think we both agree, especially in that Florida Panthers series, depth is an issue. So what are some of the things that we would do to help improve that defense? We're going to be talking about that coming up in just 1 second. I want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the financial driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is a lot more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. We're back on Locked On Lightning. One of the big topics was this Ryan McDonagh trade rumors that keeps popping up. Greg and I seem to be in agreement here. Doesn't make a lot of sense to trade Ryan McDonagh right now. especially because he really shored up that blue line last year. So that begs the question, Greg, what do we need to do to fix this defense?
I think if you asked me this a few months ago, I would have told you we need a coaching change big time. I think a lot of the positional errors were obvious this past season. I think the easiest solution to something like that is a coaching change. I also want to bring up, there was an article that was released where Sergachev talked about how the whole system was changed. And no one seemed to be a fan based on how Sergachev was talking about it. And it actually led me to speculate that was part of why he was dealt. Speculation again, but I think coaching is the first thing. We saw them make a change already, right? So that's great. I think now you want to go out and get a guy who is probably a veteran at this point, especially with the money you have left. I don't think you're looking to sign someone, in their prime long term. So we'll see. Again, I think it goes back to what I had said previously, where we're going to have to give up someone on offense, right, to probably bring in a new defenseman that we want to keep.
Yeah, I don't know. I still feel like maybe this is the year you kind of look at some hodgepodge options.
Okay.
Because again, I don't know if you want to tinker with this roster too much right now. And here's the thing. I know you've talked about Nick Paul. I don't know what he did to you, but this is the second episode in a row where you tried to trade the poor guy, Greg.
I just think he's the easiest target right now. I think he was excellent when he first came over. I don't think he was bad by any means. I think he's a great player, actually. He's one of my favorites, actually, currently on the Lightning. Yeah. I just think it's realistic for them to deal him with someone else, like a prospect of some kind, if they want to reach big for a defenseman. I think you don't want to give up Hagel, right? His contract is excellent. You're not giving up Cooch, Point, Gensel, the obvious ones, right? So who's left? Right. And I don't really see who else. No one's that valuable on the market other than those guys that you're not giving up, right? So
yeah,
I just think he's the most reasonable sacrifice, if you will.
Yeah, that's fair. I do look nervously at the new Yanni Gourde contract and be like, that money could have probably been spent elsewhere. But I think the take I was trying to make is I don't know if you really want to disrupt too much of that depth, because the Lightning's depth in the top 9 is kind of where their strength is. Absolutely. Right now. And, we just talked about Ryan McDonagh and how he improved that blue line. I think a lot of the team defense improvement is also from that depth in the top 9, because you have a lot of guys like Oliver Bjorkstrand, Nick Paul, as you mentioned, and even, just roasted his contract, but the addition of Yanni Gourde last year really improved sort of the offense stepping back to help the defense. And I think that is also a key reason why the defensive stats got better. To me, if I'm looking, I think I'm just hodgepodging it this year, to be honest, or at least at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
I kind of want to see what else is out there. Hey, does anybody remember our boy Jan Ruda? He's still out there. He's not going to command a big contract. You also have some guys out there, Matt Grzelcyk, who's out there, John Merrill's out there. A couple of other guys like, Oliver Shillington, Brendan Smith, who have been veterans in this league.
Yeah.
I still, with what is it now? Just around $3 million in cap space you have.
Yep.
You're going to be able to get at least one of those guys for way, way under that amount of money. And that's what I think you have to do this year. I think you just have to find another veteran piece on that free agent market. Maybe there's a trade out there too. Maybe there's somebody that's, maybe you swap a 5th, 6th round pick for, he's got a 1 year left on his contract. Maybe you do something like that. But to me, this is, I would say, unless you want to be really proactive and you're really thinking Ryan McDonagh is going to take a step back, or worse, you think maybe Victor Hedman's going to start showing his age at any point, that's maybe when you make the big move. I just don't think the Lightning are there yet, Greg.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, actually. I like what you said. You go for the hodgepodge, and maybe later in the season there's something there. You just never know, also, is the other thing, right? Like, look at the Rangers with Trouba, just total collapse this past season, right? Their whole team was just shaken up, and I would never have guessed that, right? And all of a sudden, there's guys that are available for trade, and I think it's okay to wait right now. The team, I think, is strong enough as is that I'm not worried about them not making the playoffs, actually, as they are. So, I think it's okay to wait. I think you'd rather wait at this point.
Yeah, no, I think and you hit the nail on the head, I think, with that Trouba comparison is who knows what this NHL is going to look like in, December, January. You don't know which team that spent a lot of money is going to start falling apart and what players who you think are going to be a big part of that core are going to step out on there. To me, the biggest thing, I kind of go back to what you said and coaching, and I don't necessarily think last couple of years was all coaching, but I do think there was a lot of disorganization on the back end. And that's kind of where I think another veteran coming in is going to help with that, because a lot of the Lightning's breakdowns, it wasn't from, a defender just getting beat. It wasn't from, Lightning just not having enough skill to match up with somebody. It was kind of like shooting themselves in the foot a little bit. Like, you have, and even some guys like Victor Hedman fell victim to this a little bit, where it was just, him thinking his partner had his back, didn't, kind of in the wrong spot, guys, wide open in dangerous areas because somebody's not tracking. The communication, I think, just needs to get a lot better. I'm actually going to kind of throw something against the wall right now. I want you to tell me if I'm just way off base or not.
Okay.
Victor Hedman wears the C for the first time last year. There's different responsibilities that come with that, including sort of a lot more of the communication aspect in game on the bench. Is that maybe, did we see some growing pains with maybe Victor Hedman being the guy sort of commanding the ice?
I actually really like that question. It's actually not something I've ever really thought about. I would say that yes and no. I'm sure for him it was a lot, right? It's something he hasn't done yet. And I think you're right. There's growing pains there to some extent. However, I do think a lot of the issues with the defense this past season was discipline, right? And yes, as a captain, you can bring a bit of discipline in, but he's not the guy who's going to bench you if you take, 6 penalty minutes that were completely unnecessary, right? So that's where I believe the coaching plays a large role. And let me just throw some stats at you, okay?
All right.
Lilleberg. Okay.
Your guy.
I actually love Lilleberg. He brings a great energy. He's very physical. You can see he's putting the effort in on every shift. I don't want to take that away from the guy, okay? But he was 7th in the NHL in penalty minutes with 105 total, okay? The second highest on the Lightning was 58. So he had nearly double the second most on the Lightning, which was Hagel. And you have to remember, Hagel got into a couple brawls, right? So 105 penalty minutes is unacceptable. I'm sorry. It is. If you want to win tight games against good teams, you can't just give up a penalty a game. It's not realistic. I think we saw whoever on that coaching staff made the decision when we had Mikey on the team, right? He was taking a few penalties that were costing the Lightning. I think right before the deadline, he had 2 or 3 games in a row where, it's like, dude, you got to stop taking these penalties. They're just completely unnecessary. And Coop benched him, right? He didn't do that with Lilleberg. I think he sat him once or twice for a healthy scratch. But if a guy doesn't get the picture, you gotta keep giving him the picture, right? You can't just let him go out there and continue to take penalties and hurt the team. We saw him take a lot of penalties in the playoffs as well. You just can't, the Panthers are going to capitalize on those. And if you're going to keep taking penalties in the postseason, you're not going to win games.
Yeah. Of course, the big question was, you bench Lilleberg. Who else do you have to put in there?
Right.
I think he was very, very raw last year. That's the best way I can describe it. Mm-hmm. And compare him to, go back to that first block, Ryan McDonagh. Sometimes I think the biggest sort of learning curve for a defenseman of that type is just the IQ of knowing like when to challenge with your stick, when to finish your check, when to lay off. That's something that I think Lilleberg needs to work on, because there's a lot of stick penalties, a lot of holdings, stuff like that. You kind of got to know if you're going to be kind of like the big stay-at-home defenseman or sort of that defensive focus guy, then you've really got to know like when to challenge, when to just contain. That's something I think maybe we'll see an improvement from Lilleberg here in year two, or year two with the main club. I think this is his third, fourth total year at the Lightning, but you know what I meant.
Yeah.
So a lot of interesting ways to fix that Tampa Bay Lightning defense. If you're listening in on YouTube, drop us a comment. Let us know what you would do to fix that Tampa Bay Lightning blue line. Or if you even think they need to do anything at all to fix. If you think the Lightning blue line is going to be solid this year, let us know that. We love hearing from you. We love receiving your comments. Speaking of things we love and things we don't, the 2025-2026 Tampa Bay Lightning schedule is out. There's a couple of things we like about it, and one month in particular we kind of hate about it. That's coming up in just 1 second. We're back on Locked On Lightning. The 2025-2026 NHL schedule is out. The Lightning, big year for them. They're going to be hosting the Stadium Series against the Panthers. We're excited about that. We're actually going to be talking a little bit about that coming up in a show later this week, and just kind of the pop and circumstance surrounding it. So tune in for that. But Greg, a couple of key stretches for the Tampa Bay Lightning this year, including, I think you have some stats on one of the most brutal months, not just for Tampa Bay, but for any team in the NHL this year.
Yeah, March, the Lightning will play 16 games, which is the most in this upcoming season for any team in the league. That is quite a number of games to have right before the playoffs. I'll throw another one at you. They do have 15 back-to-backs. 10 of those 15 back-to-backs, both the games are on the road, which is very interesting as well. I don't think I would label it a disadvantage or anything like that. I think everyone has a schedule. There's going to be tough stretches for every team. I'm not trying to make any type of excuse, but having 16 games, in March is a tricky time for that. And we'll see how they do. I know 8 are away and 8 are home, so they got an even split there at least.
Yeah, you mentioned it's right before the playoffs too, and that's a time where everybody's going to want at least a little bit of rest. Yeah. You also didn't mention it's right after the Olympic break as well, and the Tampa Bay Lightning are going to have a lot of people in the in the Olympic conversation as well, and not just some of the big guys, but you think about some of the players from sort of the smaller countries. Oliver Bjorkstrand's from Denmark. He's already been announced as part of the team. Erik Chernak's been announced as part of Team Slovakia. Zemgus Girgensons, Latvia. And then you have Hedman and Braden Point, who are on there for their teams. You might get probably a few more notifications. We know Brandon Hagel's got some experience with Canada already. So you have a chance to have a lot of key players that are going to be playing competitive hockey while a lot of other people in the NHL are going to get, some sort of break. That to me is going to be a part of the disadvantage as well.
No, I think you're spot on. I think it's interesting to have players play in these type of scenarios in the middle of the season, because it does create a type of disadvantage, right? Some teams will have very few guys going and they can just fully rest. And, that some would consider that an advantage. Some would consider that a disadvantage. We'll see, right? I mean, I think it all comes down to if everyone can stay healthy. Ultimately, that is the goal. So we'll see what happens. I think also it will influence what they do, with people's contracts. So We'll have to wait and see. But I feel optimistic. I think it's good that we can get a good portion of the schedule at the end of the season also, because by then you'll have your team, right? And you can give the team you're going to make your run with a good set of games to, start jiving together. But we'll see.
I also think that to your point, the trade deadline, I think, is March 6th.
Sounds right.
This year, if I'm not correct. So the benefit of that, if they do wind up making a move or have some new people coming in, that they're going to get some extra time, extra games to kind of gel before the playoffs start. And as we've seen around the league, like take Mikko Rantanen in Dallas, for example, sometimes it can take a while for new additions to get in. So I guess the perk is having some extra time. So you mentioned that's kind of a death part of the schedule. I will mention that it's going to be a lot of games, and fatigue is going to be a factor. But I will say, in terms of skill, that March might actually be maybe a little bit of a lighter part. I want to say I'm counting right now, and I only count maybe 6 games out of that entire March slate that are against teams that were in the playoffs last year. And then some of the other ones, who knows? Like, it's like, for instance, there's a game against Detroit. There's a game against Columbus. There's a game against Seattle, Calgary. I don't know how many of those teams are going to take a big step forward this year. So, I mean, maybe that's the one saving grace, is that there's not a lot of games against, it's not like you're playing Florida 3 times or,
Right.
having to go on the West Coast or anything like that. So, I don't know, saving grace a little bit, or does that not matter to you?
I don't know. It's tough to say. I think to some extent it matters, and to some it doesn't. When, like you mentioned, if you do bring in a key piece or a big new addition, or you make a few trades, or you got new guys coming in, I like getting them time on the ice. I don't really care who it's against, right? I just want them to be on the ice together before the postseason, assuming you're going to make it. If it comes down to
knock on wood, man.
If it comes down to, oh my God, are we going to make the playoffs? That's definitely a positive that you're not playing Florida 6 times. So, we'll see. I think also, like you said, it's so unpredictable. The league is so unpredictable, right? So you never know with these teams. All of a sudden, something can click and they can be excellent. So I don't want to say that they would beat all these teams either. I think Detroit could easily take the Lightning. I think Calgary can probably beat the Lightning if they have a good strong game. But it's very possible, right?
Well,
anyone can win any game.
Any team can beat the Lightning. Yeah, like it's one of the. It's not. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have a random 6-1 loss this season against a really dumb team. And likewise, you're gonna beat somebody like, I don't know, like Carolina 8-0. Like in Carolina, they finished way ahead of us in the standings.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I think, that chaos with the NHL where anything can happen with the schedule.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I will say, I think in terms of that, it's going to be important to get off to a really strong start if you're the Tampa Bay Lightning, because I will say, Greg, the Atlantic Division, boy, that's going to be murderer's row, I think, in the entire NHL. Maybe other than Buffalo, not a team really in there that you would look at and say, like, I could see them making some sort of really strong play this year. Montreal is obviously, I think, kind of on that verge of becoming a next powerhouse. I think Ottawa, you showed what they can do last year, getting their first playoff appearance in a long time. You mentioned Detroit. I agree with you. There's a lot of really young talent on that team that as soon as Steve Yzerman can kind of figure out how to get them all together and get that right combination going, that's going to be a juggernaut. Oh, by the way, the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion and probably consensus best put together team in the league right now also happens to be in our division. So murderer's row. And I think any chance you get to put a big run of points together, it's going to be huge, especially this year, Greg.
Absolutely. I mean, look at what happened last season, right? We didn't even know who was going to end where at the end of the season. And it turns out that playoff spot mattered a lot, right? Because we ended up playing Florida. And if you win a couple more games, maybe you're not playing Florida there. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
I have really strong takes about how the playoff format is put together, but I feel like that is a topic for another off-season show. Speaking of, a lot to talk to coming up. We kind of hinted at some stuff. Should NHL players play in the Olympics? Are you happy to see the Tampa Bay Lightning players there? That's a deep dive topic that we're going to get into next show. Plus, the future of the All-Star Game Four Nations tournament. Would there be something that you would like to see the NHL do different? Would you like to see them keep some of the things they're going to be doing? Those are topics we're going to be talking about this week on the Locked On Lightning podcast. So make sure you're tuning in for that. That's going to do it on today's episode of the Locked On Lightning podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back later this week with all new episodes. Until then, Greg Stephen over there. I'm Nick Morgan. We'll see you then.